Good morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. Welcome to the breakfast show here on Sky. Revealed this morning the damning claims from a whistleblower about the evacuation from Afghanistan and how it was handled by the Foreign Office. The government is accused of being unprepared for the cries for help from Afghans at risk because of their links to the UK. Some of those Afghans, it's alleged, have now been murdered. We'll talk to the man in charge at the time, the former Foreign Secretary and now Justice Secretary Dominic Raab, in just a few moments. Also on the show, the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, former Shadow Foreign Secretary. What does she make of it all? Plus, remember this from yesterday, the Republican congressman criticised for posting a picture of himself and his family posing with guns just days after 4 teenagers were killed in a high school shooting in Michigan. What on earth was he thinking? We're going to be talking about that in more detail at 1:30. And from the shores of the Maldives to life in Loch Lomond, we'll meet the sea turtle April, who's been given the chance of a new beginning in Scotland after being found entangled in a net in the Indian Ocean. There she is, bless her. It's Tuesday, the 7th of December. Left to die, the damning claims from a whistleblower who says that junior government officials working on the Afghanistan evacuation were asked to make life and death decisions they knew nothing about.
We're live here in County Cork in Ireland, where a red threat to life warning is now in place as Storm Barra arrives.
I'm in Esshot in Northumberland, where nearly 500 homes are still without power this morning following Storm Barra.
I'm live at Gatwick as travellers face more expensive pre-departure testing from today, while arrivals from Nigeria have to enter hotel quarantine in the battle to beat Omicron.
Olympic boycott. What will the UK do after the US says it won't send government officials to next year's Beijing Winter Games over human rights concerns? And is it last orders for the porn star martini? Why one of Britain's most iconic cocktails may be on its way out, but why? Disturbing news this morning from a whistleblower who worked in the Foreign Office during the fall of Kabul. He's claimed that failures made by the government during the withdrawal from Afghanistan led to people being left to die at the hands of the Taliban. The government is accused of being unprepared for a huge number of cries for help from Afghans at risk because of their links with the UK. The claims will be made in written evidence presented to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee later on today. It's alleged that junior officials were left to make hundreds of life and death decisions that they knew nothing about. And emails were only marked as read, so those in charge could say there were no unread emails. We'll be talking to the former Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab. He's now the Justice Secretary and, of course, Deputy Prime Minister, who was in charge at the time. First, our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports.
NATO's 20 years in Afghanistan ended in chaos as thousands of Afghans desperately tried to escape. Now a whistleblower has given an incendiary account of how the Foreign Office responded as Kabul fell to the Taliban. And it isn't good. Raphael Marshall, a former desk officer, claims that confusion, bureaucracy and disorganisation meant people were left behind. Many of these people, he says, will have since been murdered by the Taliban. Among the allegations, Marshall says that between 75,000 to 150,000 people applied for evacuation, but fewer than 5% of those actually received any assistance. He also claims that no member of the team working on these cases had studied Afghanistan, worked on Afghanistan previously, or had a detailed knowledge of Afghanistan. And more damning still, he alleges that evacuation requests in the Foreign Office inbox were read but not recorded or responded to. And in his assessment, that was so that the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary could say that there were no unread emails. Mr. Marshall reserves his most devastating criticism for Dominic Raab, the former Foreign Secretary who was holidaying in Crete when Kabul fell. He alleges that despite the desperate situation at Kabul airport, Mr. Raab took hours to engage with evacuation requests before returning the files and asking for them to be resubmitted in an easier-to-read spreadsheet. Speaking to Sky News in August, Dominic Raab defended the speed and the efficiency of the withdrawal.
So the system is operating at full speed, at full capacity, and we'll use every last remaining hour and day to get everyone we can back. We want to make sure we use every last hour and day to keep this rate up.
Marshall also says that the Prime Minister personally intervened to secure the evacuation of animals in the care of British charity worker Penfarthing. And that was at the expense of Afghans at imminent risk of execution by the Taliban. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Tom Tugendhat, said in a statement that these allegations are serious and go to the heart of the failures of leadership around the Afghan disaster, which we have seen throughout this inquiry. These failures betrayed our friends and allies and squandered decades of British and NATO effort. Mr. Marshall's claims point the finger directly at Whitehall dysfunction, and they also raise the question of whether failures at the heart of government could have had deadly consequences. Alistair Punkle, Sky News.
Well, the Justice Secretary, Deputy Prime Minister, former Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab is here. Good morning to you. Did you, as a government, really prioritise dogs over people to get them out of Afghanistan?
Well, I think you can see that we didn't do that because in 2 weeks we pulled off, and it was a joint effort, Foreign Office, Home Office, MOD, the evacuation of 15,000 people. That's just in 2 weeks. That is the biggest evacuation in living memory. The only country that got more people out was the United States. And it took an absolutely heroic and Herculean effort to achieve that under incredibly difficult conditions.
Doesn't mean that you didn't prioritise dogs over people. Apparently, the written statement that will be given to the House, to a House of Commons committee later on, is that they received an instruction from the Prime Minister to use considerable capacity to get these dogs out of Afghanistan.
Sorry, it's just not accurate. We, of course, didn't put...
So that's a lie.
We did not put the welfare of animals above individuals, and I think you can see that in the facts of 15,000 people evacuated in just 2 weeks. As I said, biggest effort operation in living memory, and only the US got more out.
That's a lie, that he said that.
I'm not accusing anyone of lying. I'm just correcting the facts.
OK. He also went on to say, this young guy who was a desk officer, 25 years old, said there were 75 to 100,000 pleas for help. Less than 5% were helped. Do you recognise those figures?
I don't, but what is certainly true is that we had a lot of people rushing to get out of Afghanistan for all sorts of reasons. And I think it's right that we had a process in place to check two things. One, that we were helping those at genuine risk of persecution, or British nationals, or people who had worked for the British government. And secondly, making sure that we didn't allow anyone to come into the UK who might present a threat to the UK. And it was important to have a process to make those decisions swiftly, but also accurately. So
it was important in order to make sure that people didn't come into the UK who perhaps shouldn't be coming in, that they were left behind to be murdered?
No, that's not what I'm saying, but I think anyone would expect us to conduct the basic checks. I mean, the real challenge in the evacuation was the operational situation on the ground, so getting people to the airport. That was extremely difficult. And secondly, verifying identity. And of course, you've got to verify identity to make sure you're helping those who are genuinely most at risk. And also, at the same time, just checking we're not, through that generosity of spirit, letting anyone in that might harm the UK.
But you accept that some of those who have been left behind have been murdered?
Look, I think it's an incredibly difficult situation. We would have wanted a longer time window in order to get out everyone who was eligible. But even after the evacuation, I saw this for myself, we were working to get flights out of Kabul with Qatar. We were working with regional partners to make sure that we could take British nationals and those that we had said that we would take. We did everything we could. And again, I say, come back to the point, 15,000 people evacuated in 2 weeks. Never been done before, certainly not in my living memory, and only the United States got more people out. I think that was actually a record that those involved, particularly those working on the ground, should be proud of.
So a longer timeline could have saved lives?
We always said that we were up against this timeline, that a combination of the US deadline and the Taliban's approach to it, that we were working to an expedited deadline. And look, that put pressure on the evacuation plan. But we'd been planning for this since well before, since January, and indeed again in April. We changed the travel advice. Those schemes like the Arab scheme were being set up. But of course, if we'd have had extra time, we would have prolonged that period. Well, and as a result of the change, you've got to adapt to the changing situation on the ground, the Taliban takeover. And at that point, we continued to work with our partners, Qatar, to get further flights with British nationals and others that work for us out. We also worked with the partners on the borders, both in the Uzbekistan, Pakistan. We did everything we could, but you have to have some form of process. Again, otherwise you're not going to be letting in those who are most at need of your help. And also, I think the public and people watching this would expect us to check that we don't have anyone coming into the UK who will pose a threat to us.
It's important that I put some more of these allegations that will develop during the course of the day to you, then you get an opportunity to reply.
Of course.
He also said, the whistleblowers, we'll call him, accused you of sending back information that had been sent to you because it was about people that what you wanted to get out of Afghanistan, because you wanted it better presented in a spreadsheet.
No, that's not quite right. But what is absolutely true to say, with the volume of applications we were considering, we wanted to make sure we had the basic facts in order to make clear decisions. I think the charge that was levelled is it took several hours to make these decisions, not weeks, not days even, several hours. I think it's right to take the time, and it was something that I was doing with the Home Secretary, the Defence Secretary, depending on the category of case, to make sure that we were helping those that were eligible, those that really needed our help, or those that were British nationals, and not allowing in those that might threaten the country.
He says that people died because you wanted a spreadsheet.
It's just not correct.
OK. Did you and the PM mislead Parliament by falsely saying that emails had been read when they hadn't? No. By ticking them as read when they hadn't been?
No.
So every email that was ticked as read and had been read by somebody who could perhaps have made a difference?
Well, I can't vouch for every action of every official in relation to every email, but certainly I've never asked for emails to be ticked as read that weren't read.
OK. He also went on to say that at times the only person dealing with the desperate emails were junior officials, and on one occasion he was the only person that was working on these emails.
Well, we had 1,000 people in the Foreign Office alone looking at these. And of course, the Foreign Office was the repository for applications for ARAP, for the special cases, as well as for questions of British nationality. So it was a challenge, but we had across Whitehall teams, 1,000 Foreign Office officials working on the evacuation, a whole range of Home Office people and MOD people working on them. And of course, it's not just a question of answering the emails, it's when they can, and there are many duplicated claims, it's making sure that you have a process that can swiftly but accurately decide those claims. That was where the focus was.
He talks about the culture at the Foreign Office and the fact that people would only work their set hours of 8 hours, others were working from home, and as a result, junior officials were being left to make life or death decisions.
I don't accept that characterisation. And I know
so that's not true.
Well, I know officials are going to be giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee later on, but I regularly checked that we were properly resourced. But the challenge, of course, with all of these things was the verification of the facts on the ground. So if you have a lot of undocumented people coming forward and saying either they're a British national or that they're qualified under the special cases scheme, you've got to find a process which can clarify the facts, the basic facts, in order to make an informed decision.
So if you'd had more staff working more hours, you could have done that quicker and potentially have saved lives?
Well, no, and it's exactly that point. I think the inherent challenge of getting factual questions in relation to undocumented people applying for the 3 different schemes that were available, that is inherent. I don't think having extra staff in London would have particularly made that easier. The challenge was deciphering the facts on the ground, as well as the second operational challenge, which was making sure we could get to the airport in Kabul, safe passage, given the very difficult conditions there.
To that end, apparently, 1 computer for 8 soldiers on the ground. They all had to use it to try to verify facts in order to get people to the airport. Do you recognise that?
Well, no, that would have been an issue for the MOD, but all I can tell you is...
If that was the case, well, how do you feel about that?
I'm trying to answer the questions and the facts that as I know them, but all I'd say is...
Yeah, but one computer for 8 soldiers when you're trying to get tens of thousands of people out in a very, very...
Well, the soldiers aren't primarily there to be behind a computer, but there were MOD, Home Office officials, Foreign Office staff. But the point I would make is that actually the troops on the ground did an incredible job, but so did the other backup officials, whether they were Home Office, Nationality or Border staff, and of course the Foreign Office led by Laurie Bristow.
Do you recognise the allegation that at times there was just one junior official on the desk trying to process all of these emails?
No, I don't. I mean...
And if that were to be the case, how would you feel?
Well, again, I don't answer hypothetical questions. What I know is that I certainly regularly checked with Nigel Casey and with the relevant director of the team, who did a brilliant job in my view, and the officials, that we were properly resourced. As I said, I think
and you were confident that you were?
I think, if I may say so, that and I understand why, if you're a relatively junior desk officer, it would have felt like you're under a lot of pressure. The inherent challenge that we had was the situation on the ground in Kabul, the challenge of deciphering and working out who was eligible, who was not, and then getting them to the airport safely. We got 15,000 people out, and I think that...
But others stayed behind and died.
Well, and this is true for, I think, for all of the Western countries that were there. We were
under... Right.
It doesn't, and but it does show you that we did everything we could, because we haven't seen an evacuation like that in living memory, and no other country. I mean, the US is the only other country, and they were there on a greater scale that got more people out.
OK. There is going to be an investigation. It was launched in August, an internal inquiry. When will we see the results of that?
The internal inquiry...
Yeah, into what happened. Yeah, his evidence was so serious, apparently, that an internal inquiry was launched in August. We haven't seen the results of that yet.
Well, that's something that the Foreign Secretary...
the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yes, but of course we've got a team effort here, and I'm sure the Foreign Office will give the full timeline when they give evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee later on today. OK,
you lost your job as a result of what happened. But on reflection, do you think that's fair?
I don't think that's true, and I know I did everything I possibly could. And again, I point to the facts that we, and not just the 15,000 in that 2 weeks, we secured the safe passage of 17,000 people if you take the period from April, which shows you that we've been planning since well before the August evacuation and the Taliban takeover.
Why do you think you lost your job?
Well, those are decisions for the Prime Minister, but I'm pretty confident from what he said to me that it wasn't in relation to Afghanistan.
But given what we're going to hear today, then potentially, we may be looking at that again, do you think?
No. But these aren't my calls. I serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister.
OK. Talk to me before I let you go, because I know that we are almost out of time. Talk to me about what on earth happened at this party that we keep hearing about at Number 10. On Sunday, you said that police don't normally, quoting you, don't normally look back and investigate things that have taken place a year ago. Yesterday, we had the policing minister on the programme. He said we should be investigating anything that is a historic crime to them. The police should be investigating that. Where are we today?
Well, so my quote was directly from what the Metropolitan Police said. This is a matter for them. They said that in relation to COVID regulations, they wouldn't routinely investigate a retrospective breaches. So I was simply pointing to what the police themselves have said. Number 10 have been very clear. There was no party. There's been no breach of the rules. And frankly, I appreciate I've answered the questions from you. I answered questions on Sunday, which I'm very happy to do, but I don't have anything further to add. It's pretty categorical.
Yeah, I understand that, Deputy Prime Minister. Final question on it, though, before I let you go, if I may, and that is that we're still talking about it, 10 days in. Why doesn't the Prime Minister or you call the police in and say, have a look at this, and then we can say, yeah, it's, our hands are clean?
Well, it's for the police to decide what they do, and the Prime Minister and
the police could ask, the Prime Minister could ask the police to look at it.
Well, to be honest with you, it's for the police. They've already had the facts sent to them. They've already had. We've seen 2 Labour MPs ask for it, and they've made clear but it's ultimately a matter for the police. And just on the fundamental point, Number 10 have been very clear. There was no party, and there were no rules breached. OK, it's good to talk to you. Good to talk to you.
Let's let you go. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, let's look at how the newspapers are reflecting that. The Guardian features the evidence of that former diplomat from the Foreign Office who insists that UK government bureaucracy left Afghans to die when they couldn't escape during the fall of Kabul. The Mail has the same lead story. The Times quotes experts who say Omicron will be the dominant strain of COVID in the UK within weeks. The Eye hears that despite the new variant, the government is confident there won't need to be a plan B for restrictions over Christmas. But the Telegraph says the opposite, reporting the booster vaccine rollout is at a standstill. Going to be talking about what we heard there from the Deputy Prime Minister in just a few moments' time. But before that, it's been described as one of the worst storms to hit the British Isles this century. And severe weather warnings have been issued as Storm Barra closes in from the Atlantic today. But it comes with many homes in the UK still disconnected in the wake of Storm Arwen. The Prime Minister has expressed his concern that hundreds of households in the north of England remain without power, but says he's been assured that the lights will be back on for the remaining 500 homes by the end of today. So, what's in store? Well, Storm Barra will bring gale force winds of up to 80 miles an hour, affecting most of the UK. Yellow snow warnings are in place for Scotland and northern England. And very windy conditions are expected across Britain with severe coastal gales. And there's a yellow warning for rain and wind in Northern Ireland, extending to Central Ireland. The Irish Met Office has issued a warning for even stronger winds in coastal areas and a red warning in the southwest. Well, our island correspondent Stephen Murphy is in Kinsale in County Cork for us, and Fraser Maud is in Rothbury in Northumberland. Stephen, to you first of all. I can see from the colour on your jacket there that the winds are picking up.
Yeah, I mean, it's been this way here since about 6 o'clock this morning. That's when that red warning, as you say, kicked into effect for here in County Cork and also in neighbouring County Kerry as well. There's another one on the way for Clare, a bit further up the Atlantic coast. That starts at about 4 p.m. They're very rare, these red warnings, and the Met office here in Ireland, Met Éireann as it's called, has said that it is a threat to life. These winds have been picking up. They're gusting up to 130 kilometres per hour. That's 80 miles per hour. We've already had one here in Cork recorded this hour of 113 kilometres an hour. That's about 70 miles per hour. All of that is expected to bring flying debris down trees, down to power lines. The police are urging everybody to stay at home where possible. Schools are shut here and in 11 other counties around Ireland as well. There's a yellow warning across the entire country and an orange warning in many other counties as well. The Taoiseach, the Prime Minister, Micheál Martin, has said today is going to be a very difficult day. Apart from the wind threat, there's also the threat of flooding. And in Cork City, which is about 30 minutes north of here, they are expecting a high tide any time now, 7:24 a.m. The council, they're very concerned about the threat to businesses and residents in Cork City. We were there yesterday. They were handing out hundreds and hundreds of sandbags. So all of this is predicted to last for the entire day and into tomorrow. And then, of course, it's going to push across the Irish Sea into Wales and the rest of Britain a bit later on today, Kay.
OK, thanks. Meantime, let's bring it. Thanks a lot, Stephen. We'll chat to you in the next hour. Fraser, what on earth is happening in the northeast? They've been without power for days and days and days.
11 days now. It is getting excruciating for those people who are still without power. There's around 500 households, Kay, still waiting to be reconnected. Northern Power Grid say that this is their final push to try and make that happen. At the moment, we are in the calm before the storm. There's no wind here at all. The temperature's about 0 or 1 degrees. It actually doesn't feel too bad, but as soon as the winds start to pick up, as Storm Barra begins to come across from Ireland over into mainland England, then we're going to see much more problematic conditions for those workers who are trying to restore power. Just for example, one scene yesterday, we were there for 4 or 5 hours watching one of the crews trying to repair a transformer. It took them that long. They were still working away when we left in the dark, and they weren't expected it to reconnect power for at least another couple of hours after we left. That was a crew trying to restore that, took that amount of time, and at the end of it, only about 3 homes were going to be put back onto the grid again. So that's the problem that they're facing. 500 properties, but many of them are isolated. Many of them will require a lot of work in very difficult conditions just to restore, just to reconnect the power to a handful of homes at each location. So Northern Power Grid say they are well staffed, they're well resourced to carry out this final push. They are confident that they'll get those remaining 500 homes back on the grid by the end of today. But of course the problem is that as the winds start to pick up, we'll see more challenging conditions for them. We saw an example example of this at the weekend. Some homes have been reconnected after being without power for 7 or 8 days, and then a fresh snowfall on Saturday meant that a lot of them lost their power again, and that's the danger, that's the fear today.
OK, gentlemen, thank you. Storm Arwen giving way to Storm Barra. We're across it for you. Still to come on the programme for you this morning. Just after 8, we'll hear from Labour's Emily Thornberry in her new role as Shadow Attorney General. What do you make of this Christmas card? Goodness me, from a Republican congressman in the United States. We'll be chatting about whether it's distasteful later in the hour. Talking to a women's rights campaigner as the government's legal review body recommends criminalising material inciting violence against women and girls. And new travel restrictions have come into force this morning as the UK tightens its border policy amid concerns over the Omicron variant. Anyone aged 12 and over wishing to travel to the UK must show a negative pre-departure test, either a lateral flow or a PCR within 48 hours of departure. After arriving in the UK, travellers will have 2 days to take a PCR test and they'll have to isolate until they receive those results. Nigeria is the latest country to be added to the travel red list, which has tougher entry rules. Only British or Irish nationals or UK residents are allowed to enter the UK from these countries. They'll have to pay to quarantine for 10 days in a hotel. Well, Katie Barnfield is at Gatwick for us this morning. Hello to you, Katie. And it's not been going as smoothly as the government might have hoped, has it?
No, Kay. Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say there has been fury from the travel industry about the introduction of these new restrictions. ABTA, the Association of British Travel Agents, has said they think it could be a devastating blow to what is already a struggling industry. They're worried because, of course, these rules apply to everybody over 12 coming into the UK, even if they're double or even triple vaccinated. And, of course, passengers have got to pay for these tests themselves, which they are worried could put a lot of people off. We heard, I mean, of course, this has been brought in to combat the new Omicron coronavirus variant. We heard last night from the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, saying that Omicron is now spreading within communities within the UK in various places without any links to international travel. So it does beg the question, how effective is it going to be introducing these new restrictions now? And as you mentioned, 11 countries now on the UK's travel red list. Nigeria, the latest to be added, to much upset from Nigerian officials yesterday, calling it, saying it amounted to travel apartheid. But the government is saying it's now going to increase hotel capacity for anyone else who has to come in and quarantine in case it needs to add more countries to that red list.
OK, thanks very much. Thanks for the update. Apparently doubling the number of hotel rooms that will be available, going to cost you a fortune if you have to stay there for 10 days. Now, did you expect to see the Spandau Ballet and EastEnders star Martin Kemp dressed up as Father Christmas in a vaccine centre this morning? Well, if not, you're in for a treat.
This winter, vaccinations are the best form of protection to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe.
In a new campaign video released by the NHS, Kemp dresses up as Santa and goes about his usual chores, which include booking his sleigh in for an MOT, polishing his boots and, of course, picking up his jab. He says it's quick and easy to fit in over the festive period and urged the public to get it ticked off their own to-do list. Take a look at some of the other stories making news for you this morning here on the programme. The US President Joe Biden will hold a video call with the Russian President Vladimir Putin later on today, amid growing concern over the build-up of Russian troops on the Ukrainian border. It follows a call between leaders from the UK, US, France, Italy and Germany yesterday, in which Boris Johnson called for a united front in the face of a mounting Russian threat. A new study suggests Viagra could be used to treat Alzheimer's. Researchers say the impotence drug was associated with a 69% reduced risk of the condition. Tests in cells suggest the drug targets some of the proteins that accumulate in the Alzheimer's type of dementia. The United States has announced that it will not send any official delegates to the Winter Olympics in China next year. Still waiting to hear what the Brits are going to do about that. Our Asia correspondent Tom Cheshire standing by for us. Hello to you, Tom. Does this matter to the Chinese?
I mean, they say it doesn't matter, Kay, but given the reaction we've already had in Beijing, I think it does. It's been a pretty furious one, even before this boycott was announced. They were attacking the idea and saying they hadn't even invited US officials, so it wasn't up to them to decide. But we've just had a press conference here from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs where they responded to this directly. And they accused, they said this idea that the lie of the century of genocide in Xinjiang was fabricated by the US. That was the reason given by the US for why it wouldn't attend, because of what it says is a genocide happening against the Uyghur people and other minorities in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses. And the US also saying it didn't want to join the fanfare of the Olympics. And the Chinese went on to say that what the US is doing was counter to the Olympic Charter principle, that sport should maintain political neutrality. That's something that China said all the way through. I think one of the other things that added to this calls for a diplomatic boycott, the US athletes will still be there, was actually the treatment of an athlete. It was Peng Shuai, the tennis player, a former Chinese Olympian. She alleged that she was sexually assaulted by a very senior Communist Party official, and then she seemed to disappear from view, only to reappear on what looked like quite stage-managed appearances on Chinese state media. I think that added to the calls that there shouldn't be this official representation, which would be taken perhaps as an endorsement of the Chinese government. But as you say, we're now in a position where we won't have US officials. We don't know if there will be British officials. They haven't made a decision yet, a public decision in any case. New Zealand has said they won't send officials, so has Lithuania, but we're still waiting to see what the British government does and whether it follows the US in this diplomatic boycott.
OK, thank you. Thanks a lot. Now, is it the end, as we know it, of one of Britain's most beloved beverages? There are fears that the iconic porn star martini might become the latest casualty of climate change. The boss of Revolutionary Bars, which sells over 1 million porn star martinis every year, told a Zero Carbon Forum that they are getting rid of the iconic passion fruit slice and replacing it with a sheet of rice paper. What? Rob Pitcher said that the slice is usually imported across the Atlantic from South America, only to be removed and thrown away by customers as soon as they receive the drinks. So as a result, is at the end of the porn star martini. I shouldn't keep saying that. If you're watching, kids at home, ask your mum. Quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The Irish Met Service has issued a red wind warning for Cork and Kerry and orange warnings for other coastal areas. Ireland is mostly wet and very windy with severe coastal gales and some mountain snow. UK, meanwhile, is mainly fine and frosty, although it's windy in the southwest. Bearing in mind that that is coming west. Look at that. You're going to be needing your brolly, basically.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, those of you doing your Christmas shopping in London over the weekend may have spotted a mysterious figure patrolling the streets. This is Sigrid, a Norwegian forest cat who apparently gets quite a kick out of roaming the streets of Soho in her bike with her owner, Travis. We're also hearing that she popped into some of her favourite clothes stores, including Mouse of Fraser. I can't do the other one. Let's stick with Mouse of Fraser. Coming up after the break, the Christmas card that's got everybody talking, but perhaps not for the right festive reasons. That to come. Hello again. You are waking up this morning to a bombshell of written evidence that will be presented in front of a parliamentary committee later on today by a junior desk officer at the Foreign Office during what happened in Afghanistan. And Ali's here, as you can see. Good morning, Ali. My goodness me, it will make for uncomfortable reading for the Prime Minister and others.
Yeah, uncomfortable reading, I think, particularly for Dominic Raab, who you spoke to this morning. He was the Foreign Secretary. And a lot of this evidence from the whistleblower was aimed squarely at Dominic Raab. He was accused of being too slow, of taking too long to read the notes about these people that were desperate to be evacuated from Afghanistan. Now, he defended himself this morning by saying that those decisions take time. He needed to take hours because people had to be verified, their identity. He said that they acted as quickly and as accurately as they could. And he said that the evacuation effort was a record people should be proud of. But I don't think that that is the account that people are going to be hearing.
What about the allegations that emails were marked as read, even though the whistleblower says they weren't? And the Prime Minister sent a note, quoting the note, saying that dogs should be prioritised over people.
He pretty directly refuted a lot of what we heard from the whistleblower. He said that he didn't recognise that account. He said that he regularly checked that the staffing was properly resourced because, of course, the biggest question, I think, with all of this were about the fact that we have a 25-year-old man here, Raphael Marshall, who said that he was left alone at one moment to monitor this inbox with thousands of emails coming in from people who want to be evacuated from Afghanistan, people who had worked alongside UK troops, even if they weren't directly working for the British government, who were left to die, he said. Now, the Foreign Secretary said that that wasn't the case.
Then Foreign Secretary.
Then Foreign Secretary. Now, the Justice Secretary said that that wasn't the case. He said that he was checking everything was properly resourced. He said he didn't recognise that account, that junior people were left alone to monitor. But I think this is a pretty credible witness and a very difficult day for the now Justice Secretary Dominic Raab.
Yeah, and also for the Prime Minister. We'll take your take on it at 9 o'clock.
Yes.
Look forward to it. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Pretty damning stuff in that written statement that we'll hear much more about later on today. The former Foreign Secretary dismissing out of hand almost everything that junior desk officer, as he described him, has said, saying that he could see why, as a junior desk officer, might feel overwhelmed. Now, a US congressman has faced criticism after he posted a Christmas photograph of his family posing with military-style guns just days after a deadly shooting in Michigan. Kentucky's Republican Representative Thomas Massie tweeted the photo with the caption, "Merry Christmas. P.S. Santa, please bring ammo." Joining us now, US political commentator and journalist Scotty Nell Hughes and Democratic analyst and attorney Ari Aramesh. Thank you both for joining us. Scotty, to you, first of all, if I may, this didn't seem very smart.
Well, I'm not going to defend that Christmas card. I mean, I do think that it was very ill-advised. It was very insensitive. It was foolish. But, Kay, I would say that about anything that involves guns and a type of any sort of promotion, because guns are serious. They're not toys and they're not props. But I would say that whether you were talking about yesterday, 6 weeks ago, or 6 months ago. But I think what you're doing, I think it's absolutely absurd to compare it and even draw on this idea that we had the horrible tragedy that happened at the school shooting and drawing that somehow that connection to the Kentucky congressman's very ill-advised posting. And I think that is what is the problem with the argument about proper gun control, this sort of logical, common sense handling of guns in America today, is because it becomes so quickly polarized that people go to their opposite ends and refuse to have a conversation because of literally the attack that's going on Congressman Massie for this one.
Okay, Ari, what do you think?
Well, Congressman Massie is a troll, and the problem with trolls in the Republican Party is that they gain popularity, just like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. The more fringe you become because of the primary system and because of the districts that are so non-competitive. If you look at the 435 congressional districts, and if you look at those districts within Republican-held states, very few, maybe fewer than a handful, are actually competitive. So in these primaries for a Republican like Tom Massie of Kentucky's 4th congressional district, he's not going to face a challenge from a moderate Republican, and he's not going to face a real meaningful challenge from a Democrat in the general. He's going to face a challenge, if any, from his fringe right. So Massie, who votes against anti-lynching laws, who compares the vaccine mandate to the Holocaust, for which it took a lot of blame and criticism, rightly so. For Massie, who votes against giving medals to Capitol police officers who fought against insurrectionists and thugs who attacked the Capitol, these are all not even dog whistles. These are just whistles to the base of his party and to the base of his supporters. And it helped if a troll can send out a Christmas card like this. Just because it's legal, it doesn't make it right. It's legal to drink 1,000 cups of coffee a day. It doesn't make it right. It would be legal to send a Christmas card and tweet it full of sex toys, but it wouldn't make it right. Again, we're not even going to get into the topic of whether it's sensitive enough or not. It's just that he's a troll. He knows by doing this, just like many other members of the Republican Party, the leader of the party, President Trump himself, he will gain more following and he will gain more headlines And that's exactly why we're sitting here talking about the 4th District of Kentucky's Representative Congressman Massey. Mind you, by the way, he might be a troll, but he's an MIT grad. He knows better.
I need to let Scotty come back in there, if I may. Scotty, go on.
But that's the problem. This is why we're having the conversation right now. If you listened to Ari's conversation, it was all about everything that is wrong about what Republicans do. And I agree. Like I said, this was an ill-sensitive. And the issues that Congressman Massey does, the key is he represents a very strong part of the Republican base. And there are people that agree that their Second Amendment rights are under attack and that ammunition right now is being limited in the American public. That's a fact. That is something that a lot of Republicans stand strong behind. But to consider him a troll and say, not point out the own, it's like, let me look at the splinter in your eye when you're looking at absolutely the 2x4 that exists within the Democrat Party's eyes. Ilhan Omar, Alicia Ocasio-Cortez, all of them, the entire Democratic Party in a lot of ways can be considered one big party of trolls that take a simple truth and twist it and weaponizes it rather than have a conversation and talk about the good things that we are learning that is coming out of this situation about how we're talking about parents should be held accountable when their children are involved in a school shooting. All of the things that we could actually build legitimate solutions for. Democrats are quick to try to see how they can politicize it, how they can capitalize on the situation in order to go after their opponents. That is not right. That is not healthy. But unfortunately, that's American politics.
Before we let you both go, was there not necessarily in the right order? Ari, will the Democrats capitalise on this?
Well, first of all, the fine lady on the other side cannot name one single law or legislation in the past 10 years, or 20 for that matter, that has limited gun rights, that has limited ammunition. So let's be realistic.
Because the Republicans have fought it.
I didn't interrupt you, Nelly. When we talk about actual gun laws, we're talking about, fact versus fiction. So the right wing and Republicans talk about the fiction of gun control when it really doesn't exist. Second, when we compare Ilhan Omar and AOC to someone who sits there with fully automatic and semi-automatic weapons with his children, and we compare that, someone who compares the Holocaust to vaccines, someone who knows better.
You mean the person that denied the Holocaust?
Again, I didn't interrupt you. I did not interrupt you. And this is not Russia TV. Let me just finish my point. So,
that right there is what is the problem with the conversation?
If you let me finish, Nelly. If you let me finish. Bottom line is this: we have a very.
You don't even have enough respect for me as a female to learn my name, Ari. Talk about sexism being displayed right here, where I actually know your name, but you're quick on the actual digs at me. That's the problem right there.
Okay, if I may finish my point. The problem with this is trolls in Congress and trolls in the Republican Party win votes because the base of the Republican Party is exactly very much pro and very much sort of amenable to this kind of rhetoric. And this is why. And unfortunately, the discussion becomes so venomous, the discussion becomes so poisonous, where you actually stand up and point out the fact that these sorts of things are wrong. You just get this sort of, whataboutism then? What about on the other side? What about on the other side? Then you see that venomous conversation.
Guys, sadly, we are out of time. Absolutely fascinating debate. Please come back and debate other issues for us together very soon. So sorry we're out of time. I'd love to hear more from you. Thank you very much. Now, EU health ministers are meeting in Brussels this morning as COVID cases surge in Europe. It comes as countries across the continent take steps to curb the spread. In France, nightclubs have been ordered to close for 4 weeks to combat rising cases. Hospitals have begun declaring emergency protocols as bed space begins to fill up. The Prime Minister said that yesterday stricter social distancing and extended use of face masks will be required in schools as well, he said. Slovakia's health minister says we'll ask the cabinet to extend a lockdown by another week. The country has been in the grip of one of the world's worst coronavirus waves in the past few weeks. Last month, it introduced a lockdown that shut most shops and services. Italy has introduced tougher coronavirus restrictions as the government there tries to cope with a fresh wave of the virus and the new Omicron variant. Yesterday saw the launch of the Super Green Pass. Only those who've been vaccinated are allowed at sports events, concerts, theatres, indoor restaurants and public events. That was introduced yesterday. NBC's Claudia Lavanga is in Rome for us. Claudia, hello
Morning,
to
Kay.
you.
Well, just as you said it, yes, hi, Kay. Well, just as you were mentioning, from the Green Pass, we've moved on to the Super Green Pass. Well, at least until a couple of days ago, people who are not vaccinated could have just gone and take a negative test to get into places like the one behind me. So restaurants or bars and sit down there, or theaters and cinemas and all the other places you listed in your introduction. Well, no longer, at least until January the 15th, as you mentioned, you'll need to be vaccinated, actually fully vaccinated, or you will have to be recovered from COVID within the last 6 months if you want to go into those into these places like that, or public entertainment places. Well, on top of that, you also will need a green pass to get into local transport, which you could have just gone on that if you had a negative test before a couple of days ago. So, well, more restrictive measures here ahead of the Christmas holidays and New Year's Eve, Kate.
Thank you very much for the update. Thank you, Claudia.
Did you know that air pollution isn't just bad for the environment, it's bad for our health too?
Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England will see heavy rain and strong winds during the morning, although Ireland will turn more showery later. There's a risk of disruption from rain and gales. Scotland and northern and eastern England will be fine. It'll be cold there, milder in the very windy southwest. Northern and eastern Britain will see prolonged rain and possibly damaging winds later, with potentially disruptive snow over northern hills. Well, the unsettled conditions will keep pollution levels low, with the air quality index between 2 and 3.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Almost 1 million women have retired early because of the menopause, putting the country at risk of a pensions crisis, a government advisor has warned. Let's talk about it in more detail. Andy Briggs, the government's business champion for older workers, joins us now, as you can see. Hello to you, Mr. Briggs. Women retiring early because of the menopause, why?
So there are 4 million women in the UK aged 45 to 55 in employment. And as you rightly say, Kay, 1 in 5 end up leaving the workforce as a result of the symptoms of menopause. And the key challenge here is this is a topic that just isn't talked about. There's a very broad range of both physical and mental symptoms that women suffering going through the menopause transition. And we need to get the topic talked about actively in the workplace so that adjustments can be made and they can stay in the workforce. Because one of the biggest challenges is that if someone aged over 50 leaves the workforce, they are less likely than any other age group to come back into employment. And that has a huge impact on them personally. It has a huge impact on the businesses who lose those skills and capabilities.
So what should employers do to try to make that not so?
So I'd say 3 core things that we'd look for employers to do. The first is just to have this talked about in the workplace. It isn't at the moment. Every single woman in the workplace at some point will go through the menopause transition. The second is to look at all the processes you have within a business, occupational health, wellbeing champions, employee assistance programs, and embed the menopause transition within those programs. And then the third area is specific dedicated training for managers, so that they are equipped to understand better what the menopause transition can involve and how they should engage with the 40 and 50-year-old women in the workplace that might be going through the menopause transition.
OK, thanks very much for the update, Andy. Thank you. Sarah Davies, co-founder of Talking Menopause, also with us this morning. Hello to you, Sarah. The menopause is nothing new. Why are we still in this position?
Because unfortunately, menopause is where like maternity was and pregnancy about 20 years ago. None of us have grown up learning about menopause. It's a taboo subject. It's a myth for so many, really. And so for that reason, too many aren't aware of what the impact of menopause is, the symptoms, the challenges, and it is a long-term hormone deficiency. And as Andy just said, too many women are unnecessarily suffering. And Also, too many colleagues shy away from talking about it, unfortunately. I've worked with women from, judges and barristers who have hot flushes or brain fog moments in courts. A woman who works for a large NHS trust emailed us after an online conference and said, thank you for the bottom of my heart. I am Black, I am bald-headed, I'm 58. We don't talk about it in our communities. I am now shouting from the rooftops about my brain fog and my menopause.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to the club, sister. Now, why is the menopause, given that, not a protected characteristic under the Equality Act?
Very good question. They're talking about it becoming a protected characteristic. It is covered under age and sex. I think it might, and we are talking menopause with my business partner, Linda Bailey, who used to work at West Midlands Police. We think it should be a protected characteristic like maternity is. It could also be currently perceived as a disability under the Equality Act, which is important for managers and employers to be aware of.
Yeah, I know that the Commons Women and Equalities Committee have opened an inquiry into the menopause. I think I'm right in saying that. What do you hope to come from that?
Well, Carolyn Harris, the MP who's been leading the all-party parliamentary group, has been amazing. A number of things. One thing is to hopefully remove the cost of HRT in England. It is being reduced because too many women are being denied HRT for this long-term hormone deficiency, sadly. A lot of women being offered antidepressants. I had a woman on an online cafe last week I was running who, for the first time, had opened up, was crying in front of her colleagues. She used to be a CEO of an organisation, and she's been offered antidepressants and she knows she's not depressed. So certainly general awareness, improved guidelines and practical solutions in the workplace, improved medical training for healthcare professionals, incredibly important, and also to make sure it's instilled in the school curriculum. My daughter's actually, who's 16, is going to help her school with a menopause lesson for her PSHE curriculum, for example.
Fantastic. And a quick shout out to James Timpson before I let you go from Timpson's.
Yeah.
Explain why he's our hero at the moment.
Because he's kindly offering currently free HRT, or currently offering to pay for the prescription charges for HRT for all his employees, which is wonderful.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because it's not free as a prescription in England, although it is in other parts of the Union.
Wales and Scotland, it is free, yeah, and in England it isn't. And actually for some individuals, including myself, we can have 3 or 4 products, so you have to pay 3 or 4 prescription charges. So for a lot of women, it will save over £200 a year, and it mustn't be forgotten. There are a lot of women struggling poverty-wise in certain socio-economic groups that just don't have access or financial means to get HRT.
Sadly, we're out of time, but it's always really important to highlight the menopause brushed under the carpet for too long. Thank you very much indeed for updating us. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's freezing cold in my studio, and that really helps me. Thanks to the team. See you at 8.